All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Torah studies and a good Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of the month of Nisan, the month of redemption, the month of Pesach, and the month of miracles. Tonight is also the Yortzeit, Beis Nisan, the second day of Nisan, is the Yortzeit of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber, Rebbe Rashab. He was the one that they called him the Rambam of Hasidus, the Maimonides of Hasidus. He took the topics of Hasidus and he brought them down, explained them so broadly and wide, just like the Maimonides took the whole Talmud and he completely wrote the Mishnah Torah. The Mishnah Torah was writing the whole Talmud in a very systematic, explanatory way. So the Rebbe Rashab did the same with something similar with the teachings of Hasidus. So the fact that we learn today the depth of the teachings of the Torah is also due to the Hasidus that the Rebbe Rashab taught and other Rebbeim. So the topic today, we're going to discuss a slice of perfection. To realize that self-improvement is not as difficult as we may think. Because when it comes to self-improvement, we want to take upon ourselves some big projects saying, I'm going to do something, I'm going to improve a certain area in my life or something, more than one area. And sometimes you try and you get overwhelmed and you say, what's the point? I'm going to try. There's so much more to do. Like you like trying cleaning the storage. And you think you want to you start everything from scratch, but the more you clean, the more you realize there's more coming, and it's easy to lose hope and say what is the point of trying it? So interestingly, we're going to learn a good lesson from a Pesach food called matzah balls. You notice in the picture we see the matzah balls, not by accident. So, but before we get there, just a short, brief reminder as we get now close to Pesach. Of course, one needs to know what we need to prepare for Pesach. We need to clean, we need to get rid of the house of chametz. Now, if we have expensive chametz, you don't have to throw it out. If you have bottles of whiskeys and vodka, which is all chametz, anything that comes from grains is considered chametz, which is forbidden to eat or to even to own on the holiday of Pesach. But you don't have to throw it out. What we do is we sell the chametz to a guy. So basically you clean the house, whatever chametz you don't want to throw out, you don't want to use, you put you close it in a closet, and you write on it that this is sold to a goy, and you authorize the rabbi to sell it to the goy, and you can find the link in the description that we'll post on the YouTube, and how to sell the chametz. So this is one thing we have to keep in mind. And of course, to get shmura matzah for the Seder, handmade matzah, the Rebbe said how important it is. It is also important to help people who are in need. So that we also have a fund to help families who are in need. So this is also a mitzvah to do on these days. Okay, so now that we said, obviously there's much more to talk about the laws, the details of laws on Pesach. You can come to shul, we'll talk about it. There's different lessons you can find online about how to prepare for Pesach. There's a lot of details, how to make the kitchen kosher and so on and so forth. Now, What is the most important rule and the holiday of Pesach, as we mentioned, is the prohibition from having any chametz, anything that is made out of grain. The only thing that is made out of grain that we eat on Pesach is, of course, the matzah. The matzah is plain ingredients, flour and water. The matzah is made very quickly. It has to be made from the beginning of the process of mixing the flour and the water until it's baked into a matzah. It cannot be more than 18 minutes. Otherwise, it rises, it becomes leavened bread, and that is the serious prohibition, what we cannot have on Pesach. Now, there are many communities that are extra careful when it comes to this prohibition. And because it is such a serious prohibition, they would be careful not to wet the matzah. We call it gebrox. In Hebrew, it's called matzah shluya. I know some may be disappointed, which means no matzah brai, no matzah bowl in the soup. And yes, because matzah bowl comes from the matzah. And if we are careful not to wet the matzah bowl is out. Why is that? What's the reason? Why is it that the custom, if you go to Chabad houses also on Pesach, you see that they cover the matzah, they make sure when you eat by the meal, the matzah is covered. So no, you don't dip the matzah in the salads, you don't dip the matzah in the soup. We're very, very careful with this throughout the Pesach. And the reason being is because the prohibition of chametz is so severe. And there is a slight possibility that there might be some of the flour that is mixed with the dough. When we mix the dough, we mix it so quickly. There is a slight possibility that some of the flour was not mixed properly, and therefore it could be that it didn't become part of the dough. And now if there's some of the flour remains in the matzah, if you wet it, then that bit of flour can become chametz. So this is, not everybody does that, but many communities do it. And Chabad also does that. Let's say inside a writing from an answer from the Alter Rebbe in a response to a question about this particular law or custom. Says the Alter Rebbe, I have read all that you have written in your letter, and I enclose herewith a brief response regarding the issue of cooking crumbled matzah. The truth is, there is no outright prohibition against doing so. Nevertheless, one who acts stringently shall receive blessings. There's a common saying, "Amachmir tovei elav bracha." If you act stringently, specifically in this case, you get a blessing. This is not a ridiculous stringency without any basis. Rather, there is a strong basis for observing this stringency, namely avoiding the possibility of transgressing the biblical prohibition against eating chametz. And he explains, we can plainly observe that many times flour remains on the surface of some matzahs, even after they have been baked. This happens because the dough was tough and was not kneaded thoroughly. And this minute amount of flour that is on the matzah can become chametz. If the pieces of such matzah are placed into soup, as many are accustomed to doing, one can inadvertently transgress a biblical prohibition. So that's it. Matzah bowl is out. What do we do? However, the Alter Rebbe comes and gives us a break. And it says what? It says on the last day, here in Israel, they keep Pesach 7 days. Here, outside of Israel, Pesach is kept for 8 days, as every holiday. Not going into the reasons why. But here in Achan Shel Pesach, in the very last day, Alter Rebbe writes that if you are lenient on the final day of the holiday, then you have nothing to lose. That's okay. The last day of the holiday, you can have your matzah balls. You can dip your matzah in the soup or in the salads or whatever. Okay. So again, the matzah shruya, which means wetted matzah, because of the concerns of loose flour from the matzah coming into contact with water and becoming chametz, many communities avoid getting matzah wet on Passover. So if you go to the groceries, the kosher groceries, in addition to what it says kosher for Passover, you will find in certain items that says non-gebrox. Gebrox literally in Yiddish means broken. It comes from broken matzah, but it is a word used for wetted matzah. So this item is non-gebrox, and this Alter Rebbe brings this also. It says, Niz'arim be'yeser, we are extremely careful to avoid consuming matzah sheruya. Therefore, the matzahs on the table are covered at all times so that water does not spill onto them. Before we pour water or any other liquid that is mixed with water into a cup or a bowl, we inspect the cup or bowl to ensure that there are no crumbs or matzah in it. When we wash our hands during and after the meal, we do not pass our wet hands over our lips. This is a custom. When you wash the mayim acharonim, the water after the meal, before you bench, we say the blessing. The custom is we wash the tips of our fingers, and then with the leftover water, we wipe our lips, and that we do not do on Passover. For the same reason, because maybe there is something left, some matzah crumbs, and we don't want to wet it with matzah, with the water. So, however, says the Alter Rebbe, nevertheless, one who is lenient on the final day of the holiday, for the sake of rejoicing on the holiday, how can I rejoice without matzah ball? I need my wetted matzah. Obviously, you wet the matzah, everything is more delicious. So for the sake of rejoicing on the holiday, has nothing to lose. Okay? Now what is interesting, among the customs of the rabbis, the Lubavitcher rabbis, on the last day of the holiday, they indeed made sure to wet the matzah. But not only to wet the matzah once, but they made sure to wet the matzah with every single dish that they put on the table. Every single dish. Now the question is why? Why would you do that? Yes, okay, I understand the Alter Rebbe just said that if you really want to enjoy the last day of the holiday, if you want to be lenient, it is okay, you have nothing to lose, you can be lenient. But the Hasidim are not known as people who are looking to be lenient. Hasidim are so careful with every mitzvah, they would do it in the most exemplary way. They would go every single day to mikveh before we pray. Every mitzvah we do is in the fullest way. So how come here, if the Alter Rebbe says, okay, you can be lenient, okay, so now we go, we run, and we do it in every single every single dish. So there must be something deeper. There must be a reason why the rabbis did it and why we do it. So here writes the Frierdiker Rebbe, my saintly father, the Rebbe Rashab, that we just mentioned tonight, his yahrzeit, Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson. He was particular to specifically eat matzah sheruya on Achron Shel Pesach, the entire Passover. The entire Passover, gotta make sure we read it right, because on Achron Shel Pesach, he would make sure, the last day of Pesach, he would make sure to eat the matzah shruya, the wetted matzah. The entire Passover, he was particular to not eat matzah together with any other type of food. But on Achron Shel Pesach, he would do so deliberately, exhibiting this custom in public. He would eat matzah with the fish, with the soup, and with the meat. I think also in the wine also he would put the matzah and wet it with the wine. And the question is why? The Alter Rebbe didn't say you should do it, make sure to do it with every dish. He didn't say that. So why do Hasidim specifically eat the matzah with every food on the last day of Passover, taking the Alter Rebbe's leniency to an extreme? Yeah, no, Hasidim are known to be extremists, right? But to be extremist to be lenient extremist, that we don't find. So we're going to talk about two explanations to this custom. One explanation would be that there is a difference between the first holiday of Pesach and the last holiday of Pesach. You know, Passover, which begins Monday night, the 22nd of April. So we have the first days is Monday night, Tuesday and Wednesday is the first days of the holiday. Then we have the last days of the holiday is the following Monday and Tuesday. Following Monday and Tuesday is the last days of the holiday. And the very last day is Tuesday. So the question is, what is the difference between these two holidays? Why do we celebrate two holidays? So the first holiday we celebrate in connection with the redemption of the Jewish people from Egypt. The last days, it explains in Hasidus that we celebrate the future redemption, the coming of Mashiach. That is one way that will explain why we don't wet the matzah throughout the Pesach, but on the last day of the holiday we do. And the second explanation will bring a message of self-improvement. And we see how a very small custom, a very simple custom, has in it so much depth and so much meaning. So here comes the Rebbe, and it tells us about the difference what we celebrate these two holidays. What is Pesach all about? It's not as simple as it seems. The first Pesach, we celebrate the exodus of Egypt. What is it about that we celebrate the last days? So the Rebbe says here, the first day of Passover is our holiday commemorating how God liberated us from Egypt. That was the first redemption. And it was carried out by Moses, the first Redeemer. That was the beginning. The final day of Passover is our holiday celebrating the future redemption, when God will send Mashiach to liberate us from our current and final exile. Mashiach will be the final Redeemer. The first day of Passover is Moses' day of celebration. The final day of Passover is Mashiach's day of celebration. Now, it is something that the Rebbe says, but the truth is, we can find it in customs that has been done throughout the years on the last day of Pesach, which tells us that this day celebrates Mashiach. For example, the reading on the last day of Pesach is the reading from Isaiah, which talks about Mashiach. In Isaiah, that's what we read in the last day of Pesach. It talks about, and a shoot shall spring forth from the stem of Jesse, Yishai, who was, of course, the father of King David. And a twig shall sprout from his roots. And the Spirit of God shall rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and heroism, a spirit of knowledge and fear of God. And he shall be animated by the fear of God, and neither with the sight of his eyes shall he judge, nor with the hearing of his ears shall he chastise. And it goes on to say, and he shall judge the poor justly, and he shall chastise with equity and humble the humble of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall put the wicked to death. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faith the girdle of his loins. So we see that this is, what is the reason? Why do we read about Mashiach on the last day of Passover? Obviously, it is connected with the coming of Mashiach. And for that reason, I'm sure you're all aware, what we do the last day, the very last meal of the last day of Pesach is called the Seudah of Mashiach, the meal of Mashiach. It is a custom that the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidus, instituted. And here, and the Rebbe Rashab added to it, to drink the 4 cups, and the Rebbe encouraged everyone to participate in this meal. So here, what the Rebbe says, it was the custom of the Baal Shem Tov to partake of 3 meals on the last day of Passover. The last of the 3 he called Mashiach's Seudah, the festive meal of Mashiach. For on the last day of Passover, the radiance of Mashiach is openly revealed. So we understand that there is a difference between the first day of this Pesach, we celebrate the exodus of Egypt, and the last days of Pesach, we celebrate the coming of Mashiach, the redemption from Mashiach. Now, what is the difference between the 2 redemptions? It's not just that something happened 3,300 years ago, and the other one will happen now, or it's happening already. Mashiach is already working in the world. But there's, if you go back to the exodus of Egypt, There's an interesting question that the Alter Rebbe asks in Tanya regarding the Jews leaving Egypt. The Torah says that Pharaoh saw that the people ran away. The people ran. Why did the people have to run? In other words, Moses asked Pharaoh permission to leave Egypt for 3 days, and he refused. And after finally getting smitten with 10 plagues, he finally agreed that they should go. And in fact, he pushed them out. And then he realized that they ran away. The question is, why did they run? When they ran away, also, everything was in a haste. This is one of the reasons we eat the matzah, very unleavened bread, very thin bread. Why? Because, as we say in the Haggadah, because there was not enough time for us to wait for the matzah to rise. So we had to run out of Egypt. But the question is why? Pharaoh was smitten so badly. And if Moses would have told them, Pharaoh, we are living and we're going to leave in a relaxed way. We're not going to run. And we're not coming back. Pharaoh had no choice. He would say, yes, go, please go. I don't want to die. He was a firstborn, don't forget. He was about to die in the plague of the firstborn. So why did they have to run? And Alter Rebbe explains that the running away from Egypt was a spiritual running. He ran physically, but this was a result of the spiritual running away from the spiritual Egypt. The enslavement of Egypt was not just a physical enslavement. In fact, the physical enslavement was a result of the spiritual enslavement. Spiritually, after 200 years that the Jews lived among the Egyptians, which was a corrupted nation, a nation that worshipped idols, and all kinds of things that they did. The Jews learned from their ways, and they were among them. They were so deep involved in the Egyptian culture and the Egyptian mentality that for them, they were actually in danger of being lost forever. If they would stay there a little longer, they would be lost forever. And for that reason, they had to run away from it. Just like a person who has a problem with an addiction. When you release, you open up his eyes and tell him, listen, you got to get out of this place. If you're going to go out and say, oh, wait a second, maybe I'll procrastinate a little bit, you're going to get stuck there again. If you see there is a problem, a spiritual problem, and you want to get help, you have to realize that you have to run away and not get anywhere close to this place. And that's what the Jews did when they left Egypt. They had to run away from Egypt completely. It is like you can take out, as the saying goes, you can take the Jews out of Egypt. It's harder to take Egypt out of the Jew. So that spiritually running was something that they needed to do right away. Now this is something that is not going to be when Mashiach comes. In the future redemption, after all these thousands of years that we are in exile, we are dealing with the challenges of this material world. There is darkness in the world. There is impurities in the world. But in the coming of Mashiach, it will be a different type of redemption. It will be a redemption that will be able to go slowly, calmly, because it is going to be a transformative redemption. Egypt is no longer going to be Egypt. I'm talking about a spiritual Egypt. Is going to be transformed into Kedusha, into holiness. That is the difference between the first redemption and the last redemption. Let's see it inside. This is what our sages tell us regarding the coming of Mashiach. It says, Ki loi b'chipaza teitzeyu in Isaiah. For not with haste shall you go forth, and not in the flurry of flight shall you go. God goes before you, and your rear guard is the God of Israel. And the reason why is like we said, because by the coming of Mashiach, there will be no more impurities. Everything will be transformed into goodness. As the prophet Zechariah says, and it shall come to pass in that day, says the Lord of hosts, I will cut off the names of the idols from the earth, and they shall no longer be mentioned. Also the false prophets and the spirit of impurity I will remove from the earth. This is why the difference by the exodus of Egypt, when we run away from the Egypt, we need to remove the source of the problems. What is the source of the problems? What is the source of the corruption, of the evil? The source of it is arrogance, feeling of self, not thinking about God, thinking of me. And that is represented in the chametz. Chametz is the leavened bread. The bread that rises out of its proportion, giving too much importance to self. And that is a cause of all kind of evil problems. When it comes to deal with your issues, when it comes to deal with your spiritual self, the step number one is remove any kind of selfishness, any type of chametz. The furthest, even a doubt, a shadow of a doubt that there might be chametz, selfish, is something that needs to be removed. That is why we are so careful in Pesach with the slightest doubt of chametz. So this is the difference. In the exodus from Egypt, we ran from the evil Egypt and meshed in our identities. But in the future redemption, we won't run. The world will already be transformed into the holy places. And that's why on the first days of Passover, we eradicate chametz completely. But in the last days of Passover, when we have the light of Mashiach, when the evil will be removed, we celebrate the last day of Passover, but the celebrate Mashiach, which represents the concept of transforming the evil into good. So obviously we're not allowed to eat chametz yet, it's still Passover, but in a way, a slight doubt of that maybe some flour may be left on the matzah, that doubt is already removed. And we celebrate Mashiach to show that we are able now to transform, that we can eat already the matzah balls. As it says, in the time of Mashiach, things will be transformed. The prophet Isaiah says, more prophecies, what's going to be when Mashiach comes. He says, and a wolf shall live with a lamb, and a leopard shall lie with the kid, and a calf and a lion cub, and a fatling shall lie together, and a small child shall lead them, and a cow and a bear shall graze together. The children shall lie, and a lion, like cattle, shall eat straw. And an infant shall play over the hole of an old snake, and over the eyeball of an adder. A weaned child shall stretch forth his hands. So all these things, all these prophecies that talks about the coming of Mashiach, even a snake. What is a snake? A snake represents the ultimate evil. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is represented by the snake. But even the evil inclination will be transformed, and it will be toys for a child to play with. This is why the custom of the Rebbe on the last day of Mashiach, of the last day of Pesach, which we celebrate the coming of Mashiach, on that day, the custom is to eat the matzah with every single dish. Every taste of the wetted matzah is a taste of Mashiach. We do it because this is the time to celebrate Mashiach. But it's not just that. It's not only because it is, in other words, it's not just something from above. They say that day there is a light that shines from above. Mashiach, light is shining, everything will be eradicated. It is something, the whole coming of Mashiach is coming as a result of our doings. We contribute to that perfecting of the world. How do we contribute to this? It takes a lot of work. And that is the second explanation that we're going to explain. As we said before, the celebration of the exodus of Egypt is a spiritual exodus as well. The Jewish people were then in the lowest of the lowest levels. In fact, it says, the Zohar tells us that the Jews were in the 49th level of impurity. And that is 49 out of 50. They were literally to almost by the bottom. And they needed to go from that point, from that low point, they needed to be elevated and to be brought to receive the Torah. 49 days later, it needed to be purified and to be elevated. How do you do this? They do this by perfecting, working on the characters. So we know that there are 7 emotive characters, 7 emotions, the emotions of chesed, the kindness or love. There is gevura, the character emotions of severity, strictness. There is tiferes, beauty. 7 different emotions, emotive characters. Those 7 emotive characters can be used in a positive way, can be used in a negative way. And each one of these 7 is included of all the other 7. This is what the Jewish people needed to work on themselves during this period, from exiting Egypt till they received the Torah. And the same period, we are commanded to count these days. It's called the counting of the Omer. 7 days from the day after Pesach until the holiday of Shavuos. We count 7 weeks, which is 7 times 7. And each day of these 7 weeks, we refine, we work on one of our inner emotional characters to make it better. So that's what they did, counting, going out of Egypt. Going out of Egypt and preparing to unite with Hashem and receiving the Torah. Here's what the Zohar says. When the Jews were in Egypt, they became sullied and corrupted by all forms of impurity to the point that they were under the influence of 49 powers of impurity. And this is what we begin counting on the first day of Passover. We count the days as well as the weeks, for it is a mitzvah to count both days and weeks. For each day, we exit one power of impurity and replace it with a power of purity. So to take, for example, the first of the emotive characters is the emotion of love, chesed, kindness, love. Is love a good thing or is love a bad thing? It depends. Love is certainly a good thing, a positive thing. When you love Hashem, that's the pure level of love. You love your wife and children. What about if you love alcohol? Liking alcohol is not bad. It's okay to say l'chaim. But if you are too into it, you use this attribute, this emotive attribute of love towards a certain addiction, or love in the wrong places, it can be a terrible thing. So when it comes in these days, we have to inspect ourselves and see, how are we doing with our love? Is it directed properly? And within the love, within chesed, there is also the sub-emotions, the subcategories of these emotions. There is the restricting, which is gevura, disciplining the chesed. That is something that we work on. Tiferes, compassion, empathy, balance. There's the attribute of netzach, which means boldness, ambition, determination. All of these attributes that we have is something that needs to be refined. There's a beautiful system that was written by Rabbi Simon Jacobson, Towards a Meaningful Life. And he writes each one of these characters, and every day how we are able to work on ourselves in a particular character. And I'm going to put this also in the link, Blineder, in the description. You can see for yourself the different characters, how those need to be refined, and how we can work on ourselves every day and something else. So this is what we worked from the day after we left Egypt. Now on the first day, the first week rather, we already complete an entire emotive character. The character of chesed, the emotive character of chesed is refined. And when we refine something, that means we are now ready to use it in a positive way. There's the story of the Mittel Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he was once on a journey, traveling. He used to travel from time to time to different cities, different towns, to visit the Hasidim and to talk to them. So at one of his journeys, he was traveling, and he received the Hasidim on a private audience, and they came to see him. And then, in the middle, he stopped the Yechidus. He said, no one can come in. He closed himself, locked himself in the room. And the Hasidim didn't know what happened. They got scared. And they went closer to the door, and they heard how he is praying and crying bitterly. And then he opened up the door, and they prayed mincha, and then he spoke about how tears that we come down, that it purifies us, and so on. Long story short, then one of the Hasidim, Pinchas of Shklav, he decided to approach the Rebbe and ask him what happened. So the Rebbe told him that every time a Chassid comes into him with problems, with spiritual problems, the way he's going to fix his problem, the way he relates to the Chassid, is that he's looking within himself to find a similar problem within himself. And then he can help the Chassid. Now, obviously, we're talking about a Rebbe finding a problem in himself is not on the same level at all than the problem of the Chassid. There is, in a very subtle concept of this. Like, for example, violating Shabbos, okay? If a Chassid says, oh, yeah, violated Shabbos, the Rebbe is not going to look at himself violating Shabbos. The Rebbe doesn't violate Shabbos, obviously. But there is concept of violating Shabbos, like it says, if you don't respect a Torah scholar, it's considered like you're violating Shabbos. Just not to say that this was what the Rebbe was thinking, but I'm just giving an example of something that can be a subtle level, subtle way of understanding a problem. So the Rebbe would say that every time a Chassid talks to me, I'm going to look something in me. But then one Chassid came to him, and he said, and he was looking, and he asked him for a problem. And the Rebbe said, I was looking in me and I couldn't find anything like that. Not even in the most subtle way. And he couldn't understand. Just a second. So the Rebbe said, when I realized I can't find it in me, I was afraid. Maybe there is something hiding in me so deep that I cannot find it. Maybe that's the hidden thing, the subtle thing that is so hidden that I cannot find it myself. And that is why he decided to do teshuvah. And he prayed, and with tears. And then finally he opened back the door. Now, obviously, we're talking about a holy man, a Rebbe, a tzaddik, is not in the same level, but it gives us an understanding that when it comes to refining oneself, there's always something we can refine better and better, more, to find things that are subtle inside us, how we can improve ourselves. And this is what we do on Pesach. That is why on Pesach we remove the chametz. The chametz, which is, it represents the selfishness, the boasting, the rising. The first step, what we do is to purge all of the chametz. What is interesting is that after this journey of 7 weeks, we do this journey and we remove all the chametz, and we improve all of our characters, work 7 times 7. We come to the holiday of Shavuos. Now, in the holiday of Shavuos, there is a mitzvah that we have to bring an offering into the temple. Now, this offering comes also from wheat. However, that offering has to be chametz. It has to be, the Torah says specifically, at the end of the 7 weeks, we bring the offering, and that needs to be chametz. Why? Let's see it inside. It says, from your dwelling places you shall bring bread for waving, two loaves made from two esronim, this is a measurement. They shall be fine, they shall be of fine flour, and they shall be baked leavened. Chametz te'afena, they shall be baked leavened. The first offering to God. And as the Maimonides says, it is explicitly stated in the Torah that they should be leavened bread. How are they prepared? One would bring yeast from another place and place it into the isaron measure. He would then fill that measure with fine flour and let it leaven with that yeast. And the question is why? And the answer is because not all ego is bad. The ego is the source of the problems. But once you worked on yourself, you have to realize that there are certain times that you can use the ego in a positive way. Use the ego to be proud of your Jewishness. If people mock you and say, you're a Jew, you're this, you're that. Yes, I am a Jew. I'm wearing my yarmulke, I'm wearing my tzitzis, I'm proud with my Jewishness. That takes a little bit of ego in there, right? So obviously, the ego and the arrogance can take you in wrong places, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be used in a positive way. And when it can be used in a positive way, it should be used in a positive way. The Torah, the verse praises the king Yehoshaphat. It says, "Vayigba libo v'daki Hashem." His heart was proud in the ways of the Lord. That is something, and that is a character that we need to adopt. And Alter Rebbe tells us why this is so important for us. The truth is that although one must be exceedingly humble, nevertheless a person should have some resolve, if even a bit of pride. For if one would not have any pride, they would never engage in service of God. For they would always belittle themselves, thinking, who am I? What is my service worth? I'm nothing, I'm a nobody. Therefore, one needs to have some pride. And this is why when it comes to Pesach, that the first week we did not touch any chametz. We made sure that any crumb of chametz should be removed completely. And once you did this for a week, you are ready to change one aspect. Yes, it takes 7 weeks to fix all 7 emotive characters. But the first week you already completed the first character. And you worked on this character. And this is why in the custom of eating the matzah, we are more lenient in that. Because right now, after a week of working on the character, we are ready to elevate that slight doubt of arrogance, and we are ready to use it in a positive way. So what do we learn from this? So number one is that everything, when it comes to self-improvement, all our emotions are intertwined. And if we think that we need to fix everything, and before we fix everything we're nothing worth, comes here the message and tells you no. And the way to do it, you do it one step at a time. If you change one thing, if you work on one character of yours, that will automatically affect the others also. So you work on one thing, one little thing, and every time you do it again, you fix it more. There was a chassid that whenever somebody asked him for money, somebody came to ask him for money, he would put his hand in his pocket and he would give the guy, and then he said, "Oh, wait a minute," and he put his hand again, and we'll give him a little more. And some people noticed that this is what he was doing. They asked him, "Why do you have to do it like that? Why don't you give him the first time the amount that you wanted to give?" So he said, every act of charity is a victory of our selfish nature. We don't want to give. We want to keep it in the pockets. When I put my hand in the pocket, I just broke my nature. And I did the mitzvah. So if I have, he said, I just can't resist the opportunity to score 2 victories at the price of 1. You do it again and you do it again and give it a little more. Reminds me another story. I think it was the Apterov, if I'm not mistaken. When someone came to him and he needed some money, needed some help, and he gave him. And after the guy left, he ran after him and he gave him some more. He says, "Rabbi, you already gave me." So he said to him, "Yes, the first time I gave you is because I felt bad. I had, human feelings. I feel bad for you. So I did it for myself. I wanted to feel better. But then I decided, no, I need to do it for Hashem. There's a mitzvah, not just for me. So I went and I gave it again for the mitzvah." In any case, this is the beautiful lesson we'll learn from this simple minhag, simple custom of not wetting the matzah. But when we can wet the matzah, comes last day of Pesach that we are allowed to wet the matzah, we don't just wet the matzah, but we actually wet the matzah. We actually wet the matzah with every single dish that we eat. Because when we are able to realize we already changed something, even if it's a little bit, we can use it now in a positive way to serve Hashem. So wishing you all we should all have a easy, a kosher, and freilich Pesach, and may we celebrate this Pesach in Yerushalayim with Mashiach in the Beis HaMikdash. Any questions?
Rabbi,
Yes.
if one has a matzah left over from last year, is it still good to eat?
Well, first of all, you got to make sure it's not stale.
Well, of course.
Yeah, if it's
Monica, no.
as far as
Замешай маме. Пойдешь в кроватку. Я
one
тебя
sec,
положу в кроватку.
I'm gonna close.
Кроватку, пацан.
So one thing is you have to make sure that the matzah was carefully, if it was carefully kept without it was not in touch with chametz, then it's okay. You can still use it.
I get you.
But I think in honor of Pesach, you probably want to get a little more matzah.
That was the question that I promised I'm going to ask you from my father. It wasn't a question.
Okay. No, people ask the question, and the answer is yes. If it was kept sealed away from chametz, if you're 100% sure, then yeah. As long as it's not.
Second question is if the matzah is not wetted but mixed with egg, no water is used, and you fry, it's called babka. Would that be kosher? Fried on oil. There's no water involved.
The answer is yes, but the but is that it is to be very, very careful that the pan should not have a drop of water. The fork, the knives, everything should be completely dry. You have to be very, very careful how you do it.
All right. So in other words, the matzah belongs in the mouth, straight out of the package.
No, you can, like I said, if you're very careful, then it's okay. Then yes.
I got it. It's only the water or anything that
The water.
contains water.
Yeah, or anything that mixed, yeah, that is mixed with water. Yes.
So milk is mixed of water, for example,
Right. Wine is mixed with water. Everything is mixed with water these days.
except for oil. Oil and an egg is not water.
Right.
I got you. Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Bye, Cohen.
Yes, Laser.